So every year there are more people registering for the visa itself than there are spots. And then that number has only increased like dramatically over the last 10 years. And so you think about last year, same 65,000 spots, 780,000 people registered. And so you're talking about the vast, vast majority of people who do immediately just are almost certainly like not going to get it. And so we've created a system where some of the most incredibly talented people who come from every corner of the globe gets chucked into a lottery system, irrespective of their degree, irrespective of their work experience. They are beholden to a category that largely does them a disservice, because the likelihood of them getting it every year is pretty low, right? So that's currently how most of employment-based immigration works. And the big insight that happened is, I think America is starting to take its immigration problem seriously.
Welcome to Sorcery's podcast. I'm Molly O'Shea, the founder of Sorcery, a weekly top VC deals newsletter and now podcast, highlighting the top GPs, founders, and deal announcements leading the next innovation cycle. Today, we have Minn Kim, founder of Lighthouse, a recently launched early-stage immigration solution for pioneers in technology. With Lighthouse, you can find out which visa path is right for you in just a few clicks. They serve the world's best and brightest in the startup and technology industries, with the fastest path to prepare and submit U.S. work visa applications. Lighthouse builds software to power efficiency and provides the highest quality U.S. immigration experience. This is a very enlightening, informational, and awesome conversation. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Minn. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me on, Molly.
Of course. Well, I'd love to dig in. So you founded Lighthouse. How did you start your career, and how did you end up founding a company?
Oh my gosh, how far do you want to go back? I actually started my career in New York. So I was born in Seoul, and so immigrant story in some way, but I grew up mostly on the East Coast, and I have spent the bulk of my career supporting entrepreneurs. I started my career in financial services, finding early stage technology companies for a really big financial services company to buy. And I knew nothing about tech and startups. And it was like basically my first foray into learning about like the industry. And this is 2015 in New York, where, you know, there was like the heyday of Oscar Health and Datadog. Hinge was starting to become really popular. And so New York was an emerging, like, it is obviously a much more robust ecosystem today. But there were a lot of like really cool companies that had become quite big, and it had made the tech industry like really prominent in New York in a way that I don't think it had as much. So I was kind of thrown into that world. I spent all of my like weekends going to meetups and like evenings showing up to events and just like wanting to meet early stage founders. And that is how I ended up in venture, actually. And so 5 years ago, I ended up moving to San Francisco from New York. We can talk about San Francisco versus New York if we want to. And I just felt like there was so much electricity in the city, and all of the most interesting people that I was excited to meet were here. I was sliding into people's DMs, and I ended up meeting incredible people, like who were so generous with their time, like the Slack founder, just like the people at Twitter who I just like really admired from afar. And so I figured out I need to find a way to come to San Francisco. And the only person that I knew in SF was a VC. And so I actually went to him. His name is Roy Bahat at Bloomberg Beta. And I asked him for advice about how do I break into startups. And he gave me some really candid advice that if you really want to break into startups, you're really going to have to build a community. And if you've never really had one before and you're not really in it, that's going to be really hard. And so he offered me a job, which was incredibly gracious. And so I went back to New York, thought about it, and figured, you know what, like this might be like the chance. And so I called him up a couple of weeks later, said, hey, if that is still on the table, I'll like start on Monday. So that's how I ended up going from financial services in New York to San Francisco. And then that kicked off like my tech career. And I spent for about 3.5 years investing primarily in AI and robotics, and then moved over to a startup called OnDeck, where I launched a global accelerator working with international entrepreneurs from every corner of the globe, you name it. And it's been an extraordinary learning experience of just understanding like what do early stage entrepreneurs need and what do fast growing companies need. And that is in a lot of ways what's inspired me to build Lighthouse.
That's amazing, and I totally get that. Coming from New York too, it's nice to get out of the bubble and experience new things. And I was always itching to get to San Francisco because the energy there is just it's all there. That's where tech is. You
Mm-hmm.
go there and you feel like a tourist, but like that's what's going on. And in terms of Lighthouse, I'd love to understand what's your mission. How did you discover this problem? How big is this problem?
So, Lighthouse is your full stack immigration solution for the world's best and brightest. The problem is, in some ways, how come you can do your taxes online? You can incorporate your company online. You can get the expert support that you need should you want it. But there's no reason why some of these processes, especially when interacting with regulated industries, like shouldn't be much more fast, simple, and straightforward. And today, part of like the mission or the mission itself is actually how do you unlock the world's best and brightest to be able to do what they are meant to do, right? Do what they build. And the US is kind of like a titan of the global technology industry, right? And it's a beacon oftentimes for people who want to be ambitious. And this is still the destination for a lot of those individuals who want to do extraordinary things. And we have this singularly bureaucratic process that keeps them from being able to either come or stay. And so a lot of what motivates me and our core vision here is we want to democratize access to high skilled immigration because it happens to be one of the biggest assets that this country has. And for decades and decades, we have benefited from it economically, politically. And if we rest on our laurels, I am a strong believer and advocate that you lose in the long run because you just have atrophied in the culture and in what we stand for.
It's a huge problem, and I don't know if many people know the real constraints of that or even the data behind it. But if you have any sort of examples, I'd love to understand like how many applicants there are a year, like what's the approval process like, how does how does U.S. immigration really work?
Oh my gosh. So I'll divide it up into employment based and not employment based. And so not employment based is marriage, green cards, asylum, refugees. That's its own entire industry and category. But when it comes to and I'll stick to employment based because it's this massive category that hundreds of thousands of people apply for every year. And so I'll give you some history, which is in 1990, the US established like limitations on the H-1B visa. That's usually what most people recognize when they think about high skilled immigration. It was a category that was invented for specialty occupations so that the United States could attract and hire foreign nationals to do specific roles, everything from distributed systems engineering to management consultants to accounting. And so these are these very specific categories that in 1990 we said, okay, we will allow 65,000 of them a year. And the trouble is that there are many, many more people. There's like over demand than there is supply. And so the cap, which is 65,000 H-1Bs every year, in 1997, if I remember correctly, basically reached its cap already. So every year there are more people registering for the visa itself than there are spots. And then that number has only increased like dramatically over the last 10 years. And so you think about last year, same 65,000 spots, 780,000 people registered. And so you're talking about the vast, vast majority of people who do immediately just are almost certainly like not going to get it. And so we've created a system where some of the most incredibly talented people who come from every corner of the globe gets chucked into a lottery system, irrespective of their degree, irrespective of their work experience. They are beholden to a category that largely does them a disservice because the likelihood of them getting it every year is pretty low, right? So that's currently how most of employment-based immigration works. And the big insight that happened is I think America is starting to take its immigration problem seriously because this has been a problem for a really long time. You see it in green cards as well, where there's only 200,000, like 250,000 green cards that are also issued a year, and there are millions of people across America who are also seeking to become permanent residents. And that's why you often hear headlines about backlogs and 10-year wait times, and especially, impacting like Indian or Chinese or Mexican or, certain nationalities more heavily than others. And that has reached kind of a peak, I think, over the last couple of years because we're recognizing that people are leaving, right? As in all the other countries over the last couple of years, you talk about a global war for talent, right? Canada, Australia, the UK, Portugal, even countries like Estonia, they're saying, amazing, great. We had a pandemic and people went remote. You want to come work here? You want to build a company here? By all means, like we'll make it super easy for you. Fill out an online application effectively and you can be here in a couple weeks. And so not only has our current immigration system failed our foreign national our immigrants, the people who want to be here, every other country around the world that wants to compete and build like new technologies or be the home for the next Google or the next Nvidia, they are attracting talent from all over the globe in a way that is meaningful. Like, it is not necessarily going to be the case that the US continues to be the default destination when every other country is now catching up.
How does the system traditionally work? Like, are individuals using agencies? Do they do it through their employer? And how do you even like educate yourself on trying to get it done?
So I've spent the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, as an immigration consultant, and you have to register with the State Department. And as I've become much more familiar with this whole system and process and been able to speak with thousands of people who have gone through this process and then eventually started helping them prepare their applications, that was like my learning curve. And what that exposed is actually there's a lot of misconceptions, and most people don't know what they don't know. And so there's this huge knowledge gap in the market. And what happens is, for most work visas, you do have to have an employer. That is true. And some visa categories have an educational requirement. So if you're familiar with something like the TN, that is for Canadians and Mexican nationals. It is specifically if you have a bachelor's degree or equivalent work experience and your role in the US is going to be tied to an employer for a specific category, like a classification that is listed as part of the TN. The H-1B is very similar in the same way. Some educational requirement, you need to have an employer, you have to fit the classification that USCIS is expecting. Now, what's unique about the last 2 years, let's say, is that the Biden administration has basically said, oh, we actually really need STEM talent in this country, and we're doing a poor job of supporting them. And lawyers are great and experts in their domain, but they're not often incentivized to get creative. And something interesting that I've observed about the immigration industry is that if you are an extraordinarily talented legal professional, your incentive is not necessarily to go into immigration, because you will probably earn a lot more going into corporate law or contract management negotiation. And so immigration tends to be made up of a smattering of boutique law firms, like immigration attorneys who have set up their own shops, with a handful of other, partners and attorneys that they work with, and a small army of paralegals and legal assistants. And there's a couple of like big law firms like Fragaman or Erickson or Ogletree that also do big visa support, but really it's made up of a lot of like tiny boutique firms. And so oftentimes there's information asymmetry when someone who is interested in a visa goes to an attorney and they say, hey, I think I need a work visa. And so they get a default answer. I was like, okay, fine. Like the H-1B, like we'll work with your employer and we'll submit you into the lottery. But it's kind of like, well, but my likelihood of getting the lottery is like potentially like single digit percentages. And so what are my other options? And the lawyer's not necessarily always incentivized to get creative and tell you a different answer. And then the employer doesn't always know what they don't know, right? And so they go, well, let us ask the attorney. And so what ends up happening is lots of individuals who are high agency will go and find out. They'll ask their friend, they'll say, hey, like, did you like do, what did you do? Because I don't really want to go back to, Europe or wherever. I don't want Google to have to move me to Canada. I'd rather stay here. And this is particularly painful, especially if you're a foreign national who came here for school and you graduated and you've spent a couple of years in the US and you're getting your job and you don't have a clear way to stay. And so one of the things that's happened over the last couple of years is there are these existing paths in the immigration world that are underused. And so the O1, the J1, the STEM OPT extension, which people are familiar about, but is now expanded. And this is the Biden administration saying, oh my gosh, we are failing our like best like technical talent in the country that are already here or want to be here. And how do we help evangelize these existing paths so that they can be more accessible? And if more people learn about them, then they can self-advocate for them. And this is a bit of a different approach because I don't know, like a decade or 15 years ago, the tech industry like took a really concerted effort to push on immigration because they recognize like what an important policy problem this is. And a lot of the good things that did come out of that were great. We should have an entrepreneur visa, or we should have like its own like new category. And there's been like a tremendous amount of like valiant effort and money and put into that, but creating like new policies is just hard oftentimes. And the quote unquote like hack right now is actually there's a lot of categories that already exist, but they're only used by like 10,000, 15,000 people every year when really they're uncapped. And actually, if more people knew about them, they can self-select into them. And so the O1, we can dive into that as well. But the O1 is like the big visa category that I think is basically America's best kept secret right now for high skilled immigrants. And the startup industry is like starting to pay attention and realize that this is like an incredible opportunity to help 50,000 more people get visas in the US, if not more. But that like we're just now catching on to that wave.
Yeah, so let's break that down. So you offer services for a handful of different kinds of visas with Lighthouse. What are the main offerings that you provide?
I will start with the O1 because that's our bread and butter. This is what's historically known as the Einstein visa, or colloquially, lots of people are a bit put off by that, and rightfully. And so USCIS calls it the extraordinary alien visa. And historically, most people didn't apply because you look on the USCIS website and it says, have you won an internationally recognized or nationally recognized award? And examples are like a Nobel Peace Prize or an Oscar. And if you haven't won one of those, like, you look at that and you go, well, I'm never going to be that. And so a lot of people don't even think about this as an option for me. But the crazy thing is, it is a lot more accessible than people think. It is a story about what makes you special and what makes you an expert in something. And ultimately, what we're aiming to do with this is support more people in being able to identify what is it that you've done in your professional or academic career that that demonstrates that you map to a couple of the requirements that USCIS is looking for. And if you do qualify, then it's a 3-year work visa. There's no minimum educational requirement. There's no prevailing wage requirement like the H-1B. And so you don't have to pay yourself like a salary that the government designates. It is renewable in perpetuity on an annual basis. And there's no country caps, which means that right now there are 10,000 people who apply roughly every year. And only less than half of them are what you would call STEM talent, like individuals with technical degrees. And there's no reason that it can't be 10 times that. And so part of our vision is, we want to 10x the number of people getting O1s approved, because there's no reason why there are 65,000 people getting H-1Bs and only 10,000 people getting O1s. And the crazy part is most people who are familiar with the O1s outside of the tech industry, it is historically largely used by the entertainment industry. And so Hollywood figured out something that Silicon Valley did not, which is you get really talented people from overseas, and how do you help them have work authorization and be able to stick around in the country for long enough? And so the O is super popular amongst models and athletes and musicians and like all like musicians and like Justin Bieber, basically. And instead, while we are allowing brilliant people in the entertainment industry to figure this out, we're letting down, the quantum physicist who came here for their PhD and then now doesn't feel like they have an option on how to stay.
Wow. Okay. So we have models and we have actresses, we have celebrities, and now we need to help out the quantum physicists.
Totally. The quantum physicist, and right now, San Francisco in particular feels like a really special place because it is the hotbed for AI. And then just like the West Coast right now feels like really special in terms of, there's like a hard tech boom. I think you had a couple of great folks on the podcast, like Delian and Chris, and the whole Gundo Gundo area. And yeah, the Bay Area right now just feels really electric. And beyond the vibes, like agglomeration effects are real, like on an economic basis, where once you have a dense population of really smart, highly educated, or productive people, that tends to have virtuous cycle effects where more really talented, productive people want to be there, because there's a network effect and a community around that. And that and that's really hard to recreate. So I'm like a big believer in emerging startup ecosystems across the country, across the world. But the thing that I think makes like the Bay Area in particular still really special is that, for these like highly technical industries and profiles of people, they still want to come here.
Yeah, we love the El Segundo gang, and we love the AI talent that's coming out of DeepMind and OpenAI. Like the momentum is real, and it's really driving a lot of progress and a lot of new jobs. And all this talent is just flooding the state. So that's a real thing. And I want to go back to a bit on your career. So you were an investor, and you invested in AI and robotics. Now you have a company. We're in this like amazing renaissance of the shift in technology and how platforms of tech stacks are being made. And so this is traditionally like a service-based industry. I'd love to get your perspective on how you're building it differently and how you're looking to make it much more efficient and scalable.
I love this question. I think right now is a really special time to be building a vertically integrated business, especially when you have a problem that is discrete and tractable. And so I'll divide it as like there are complicated problems and there are complex problems. It's like a 2x2. And complicated problems are ones where it's a discrete thing where the steps are known and the output is very clear. It's like it's either a yes or a no, it's done or not. And complex problems are like, drug discovery, like biotech is like full of complex problems where like you don't really know what the output's going to be. I really like complicated problems. And what's exciting about Lighthouse is actually it's like a really great complicated problem. And what customers experience, like people who have gone through this process, experience is it's slow, it's confusing, and it is it takes forever basically, and you have like a terrible customer experience. And so how I think about our company is actually it's like an iceberg where 30% of what users see is ensuring that we build in like a delightful user experience so that this process doesn't feel so cumbersome and onerous, right? They want to make sure that the user has like an amazing experience. They want transparency into the process. They want to feel like they're in good hands. They don't actually always want to talk to an attorney, to be honest, and be on these 100-line long like email threads. They just want to know what's the status of my application, what information do I need to give you, what information do you need from me, and then once like is it ready? That's basically like what people want to know. and they want to know that it's going to get done well. And so how we do that is actually like the 70% under the hood. And that's where I think like vertically integrated software and operational processes is like really exciting, because we're combining the domain expertise of how do these applications come together, which historically is like done by lawyers, paralegals, and legal assistants, and then combine that with proprietary software, a lot of which now can be AI-ified, right? I put it in like quotes because I don't lead with, this being like a crazy AI company necessarily, but it is true that, when I can give you an example where if you have a researcher who's applying for an O1 or a green card, like there are probably anywhere from 3 to 15 pages worth of content that we have to write that is a reflection of the research that they have done. An average person is not going to know, what the original contributions are of the algorithm that built AlphaGo, right? And it's probably like hundreds of pages worth of research. We have models now that actually can summarize that quite concisely and effectively. And then on top of that, we're building in our refinements to be able to say, okay, great, now how do we make sure that this meets like the standard that we need it to be in a way that the government will understand and grok? Right. And so it's that last like 20 to 30%, that last mile of human judgment and domain expertise that's actually really, really special. And the rest of it is like saving the people who've been doing this in a certain way for decades. The pain of, oh my gosh, well, now I have to go Google a bunch of things, and then I go and open up Adobe and I drag these files in, and I've now spent 6 hours putting together a 300-page application. And I've not done actual reasoning in it. It was literally just the mundane drudgery of like compiling.
Yeah, and you're not only saving costs in terms of legal fees, right? But you're also like maximizing your own margin because it's just much more efficient.
Totally, totally. And that actually affords, on our team, we think about this in the context of how does that free up what we need to be doing and what we can be doing? And that means we can spend more time interacting with customers, giving them the advice that they may or may not, that they may be looking for, because ultimately people want to feel, there are two things that people like care about most in this industry. That is like trust and speed, right? And trust is a function of quality, right? They want to know that if you are handling my application, it will get done well and you will help me prepare it effectively. And if I have a hairy question, that the right people will be around the table to be able to help me get the answers I need. And then speed, which is, there's a huge difference between someone being able to start working for a US-based company in 4 weeks versus 4 months. And the amazing thing that I will give USCIS a ton of credit for is that over the last couple of years, they've really, really tried to make things a lot more efficient, rolling out digital processes. Like the entire H-1B application registration process this year was digital and all online, which is kind of amazing. And in giving options to do premium processing. And so that means depending on the visa category, so for like something like an O, you pay a couple $1,000s to USCIS, and it means you are guaranteed an outcome within 15 calendar days. That's like insane and amazing, which means that if you can prepare your application in a matter of weeks, maybe days, right, then you can get an answer in under 30 days. And that is like a huge time saver, and mental load off of like the people who are going through this, because it is oftentimes like the most stressful thing for them.
I'm curious, like as you think about growing the platform out in the future, if you're thinking about partnerships or creating some sort of marketplace.
Oh my gosh. So many exciting experiments that we want to do, just in terms of core partnerships where we work with and meet amazing prospective customers. We work with the Good Humans at On Deck, at HF0, like a couple of these like programs where they're already beacons for like really top talent, right? And expanding that is going to be a big focus over the next like year plus. And then in terms of long-term opportunities, I am really excited by this like full stack like legal services company that we're building, where if we were to follow the customer, like where does this go, right? I get tons of questions about employment law. And so is there a way where some of those things actually, it's like pretty consistent, and not all of them necessarily, again, fall in the camp of this is some edge case that you need someone who has a decade plus of experience, like needs to necessarily give that advice. It is actually, oh, okay, can we build, like, what are products that we can build there to help individuals understand, okay, great, you've now just gotten a job in the US. If you're a company, what does that mean for you? Like, how do you need to make sure that you are compliant with the fact that you have foreign nationals on your team, and helping teams understand that. um, the job thing is really interesting because it is true, right? Like if you're thinking about quitting your job to start a company, or join a new company, like the first thing you're worried about is how do I make sure that my visa status is not jeopardized. And over time, I think really interesting like opportunities to work with companies like HRS systems, ATS systems. I have this like feature in my brain of any recruiter should be able to open up their ATS system, and like, you know, all the applicants that come in see like a little like Lighthouse button, to be able to show that, oh, these people are eligible for XYZ visa, and that this shouldn't be a blocker, right? Because a lot of the times I think there's a pattern, or maybe some behavior where it's like, if you believe that this process is going to be hard, complicated, take a long time, expensive, you just don't want to deal with it, especially if you're like a fast growing early stage company. And so closing that knowledge gap and helping hiring managers and companies realize like this doesn't have to be a blocker. There's a way that you can make this as simple as like clicking a couple buttons.
And by the way, I've heard you've already helped out a tremendous amount of people in the Bay Area and in, Silicon Valley and tech in general with their visas, anywhere from the Extropic founders to Lilia to SF Compute, HF0 team, and even some pretty notable hard tech founders. How do you think about growing out your services and serviceable customers throughout this year? Like, do you have goals you want to hit? How many people can you help out a month, a year? What's the timeline and kind of pace for that?
Well, we are open for business. I'm super, like, we have an incredible team of people who have experience across engineering, operations, legal expertise. So I'm really excited for us to grow. We're already working with several dozen individuals and their companies, and we've got like a wait list of several hundred people. And the goal is this time next year, I hope we've served, 1,000, right? Individuals be able to like navigate their immigration, and hopefully means that they can continue to be here and build the great things that they want to.
1,000 is an amazing goal. If you can help out 1,000 people with their careers and maintain their jobs, that's a really great accomplishment.
Yeah, there's been a through line in my career that feels like people that I really respect and admire, what are the things that block them? And hindsight 2020, right? But or rather, we make this story in looking back. But when I think about what's been the most rewarding part of like building a company, of like the career that I've had so far, is I've gotten to work with some incredibly talented people. And at InVenture, it was great. Capital is like your blocker. Like, you need money to be able to build your companies. And then at On Deck, it was community. It was like, great, you need to find your people, whether it's a co-founder or like your first great hire or that expert that you've been wanting to talk to about like the industry that you want to build in. And then now it's like career, and like part of career is actually like that immigration component where, hey, this is actually the biggest blocker in you being able to choose what you want to do. And the thing that I strongly also believe is that the people who also choose to be here, right? Like, I'm an immigrant. I could live elsewhere. My parents are serial entrepreneurs. I've known nothing, truly nothing in my life other than entrepreneurship. And it took me 11 years to become a citizen. And in some ways that feels like the most American thing you could do, which is to choose to be one.
That is, and maintaining that and helping others. It's an amazing feat, right? Like, that's something to be proud of. Um, from your experience living in New York and coming to SF, I want to know, Min, is the SF hype real? Would you ever go back to New York? Would you try other cities in America? What are you thinking?
Oh, the SF hype never went away. I think it is a deeply, deeply special place. And if you are ambitious and weird, I think this is like San Francisco is like the perfect place for that. If you're ambitious and cool, I think you live in New York. And I'm
So are
sure
you
there
saying you're weird?
I think I err probably on like weird nerd, therefore West Coast, and then
Okay.
and this is like me humbling myself because I think in the past life I might have been like ambitious and cool. But my wardrobe has definitely downgraded in San Francisco, and then when I'm back in New York, I'm always a little bit shy about, oh my god, I need to step it up because everybody here is really trendy. Um, yeah, but I think like both cities are amazing. I don't really see myself being able to like live anywhere else right now. Never say never, but I'm like a fully adopted Californian at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to go back once you have adjusted to how awesome the state of California is, except for the taxes and a lot of other things, right? But like
The most expensive life subscription is how a friend described it to me, and it is true.
it's true, but at least we have sunshine. In New York, it's constant dreary weather. I also grew up in the area, so I just whenever I go back, I'm like, there's no way I'm ever, there's no way I'm ever living here again.
Yeah, there's so many beautiful places around the globe. I have family in South Korea, I have family in Japan, both incredible, incredible countries and cities, and I love visiting. But when it comes to if you want to like meet your people and you're kind of like young and hungry and a little nerdy, San Francisco can't be beat. Like where else like can you go to like a party and you end up in like a 3 hour debate about, I don't know, like nootropics, right? Like where else am I ever going to have that kind of conversation? And maybe you don't want to, but it's certainly never a dull day.
No, it's not. And like you might also rub shoulders with Sam Altman and then like not be phased by
That's
it.
true. Although I will say, working on immigration is always interesting too here because how I was talking about how the O1 in particular is like Hollywood figured it out, and then San Francisco, like Silicon Valley, is now catching up. I think there's a distinct way in which New York handles like celebrity and fame that is like a bit more blasé and like a bit more like not a big deal, like cool, you're still a human. And I think probably Silicon Valley could borrow a little bit of that.
Yeah, they might.
But it's all like it's all good fun. Yeah, you've had some amazing people on, and I feel like Sorcerer is really special, and there's like a ton of really incredible people right now what feels like building things that could be generation defining. I tend to find I've found that in looking back and reviewing like the history of Silicon Valley and like the tech industry, every 15 years or so, there are these like category defining generational companies. And you think about the SpaceX launch recently and, seeing Waymos on the street and knowing that, yeah, that was a decade plus endeavor. And it took like lots and lots of capital to be able to finally get to a place where you can have the self-driving future that we imagined. And right now feels like a version of that where people are building like robotics companies, like finally, because now you can actually manipulate the physical world with the tools and then the underlying compute and the models that we have available. You can now build the hard tech companies that are vertically integrated businesses and previously old industries because there's the cultural lapse of people knowing what to do in those industries, and a ton of other companies where I feel like we're just taking a completely fresh eye into the same problems that have existed for a really long time.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I mean, I'm even astonished. I had Delian from Varda on. I've had Chris from Hadrian on, and even since I've had them on, they've had huge, like even more announcements and like milestones. And so it's like the velocity is like really taking off, especially with them. So happy I had them on. If anybody else wants to come on that is about to do a lot of stuff, please let me know. But the curve is taking off, and a lot of people are using tools that are out there to really progress. And luckily, like in your benefit, right? Like a lot of really great talent is
Mhm.
coming to service that or just, operate. And especially from Europe when it comes to AI, um,
Totally.
and some other countries. So yeah, I mean, it's an amazing time to be in tech. Like there was like a little bit of a doom in the beginning, but you kind of just have to accept the fact that it's moving in this direction, and we're gonna have to go in this direction. But as we close out, I'm really curious. So, with Lighthouse, what are your goals for this year? Are you going to be hiring at all? How are you looking to build out the company and continue to grow?
We are an incredibly intrinsically motivated, small but mighty team. We will be growing. And so if anyone is interested, you can find us at lighthousehq.com. Drop us a line. You can find me on the internet. And then, yeah, the goal is to we serve a lot of individuals and fast growing companies. And so being able to serve like hundreds and hundreds and more of them over the next like 6 to 12 months is like the primary focus. Doing that through some incredible partnerships with company organizations like On Deck, and a couple others. Like that'll be really exciting, and lots more to come there. And what else? If you are thinking about starting something new or about joining something new, and you need visa help, also reach out, because a lot of the times I found that the best people we get to. I feel like sometimes we're in on a secret, because this is the first thing that a lot of people want to know how to figure out before all the other stuff. And so we get a sneak preview into what people want to be doing very shortly in the future. And so if you're one of those people, come find us, because we'd love to help.
That's amazing. And also a little bit of like a hint of alpha there for some VCs.
Perhaps, yeah. If
Perhaps.
any of your listeners, it is true. I feel like we genuinely get like a sneak preview into the future.
Well, thank you so much, man. It was so fun to have you on, and congrats on all of the success in the launch and having a growing wait list. Like this is amazing and such an awesome opportunity for not only America, but like the technology industry in general. And you're doing a great job, so congratulations.
Thank you. We are democratizing skilled immigration. Let's get more immigrants here.